The year was 1692, and a creeping dread had settled over the Massachusetts Bay Colony like a heavy fog. The whisper of superstition called through the narrow dirt roads of Salem, slithering into homes, curling around the throats of families who spoke only in hushed tones. Shadows lengthened in doorways, and the forest that once provided shelter now loomed like haunted sentinels against the twilight sky. In a modest cottage on the outskirts of town, Eleanor Graves tended to the fire, its flickering glow casting restless shapes upon the walls. She had always been wary of the woods behind her home, a tangled mass of gnarled trees that had stood long before the first settlers arrived. The villagers said those trees had memory, that they had watched men die, their roots drinking deep of spilled blood. Eleanor shuddered at the thought and turned her gaze toward her son, James, who lay nestled beneath a thick wool blanket. His fever had not broken in days. His small body trembled, his face slick with sweat, and every so often, he would mutter strange words in his sleep. Eleanor whispered a prayer, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. The wind outside picked up, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers. Then came the sound. A low, drawn-out moan, rising from the woods beyond the cottage. It was not the howl of a wolf nor the cry of an injured animal. It was something else. Something human. Eleanor stiffened. The moan turned into a wail, long and shrill, weaving through the trees like a lament from the grave. Her hands shook as she reached for the iron poker by the fireplace. With hesitant steps, she moved to the window and peered out into the dark. The woods swayed unnaturally, as if breathing. Shadows crawled between the trees, thick as ink, shifting, riding. And then, she saw them. Figures. Women with sunken eyes and lips blackened as though charred by fire. Their gowns hung in tatters, and their hair moved as though caught in an unseen current. They stood just beyond the tree line, watching. James let out a sharp cry behind her. Eleanor spun around, rushing to his side, only to find his eyes wide open, his small fingers clawing at his blanket. "They are here," he rasped. "They are waiting." Eleanor's breath hitched. "Who, my love? Who is waiting?" James lifted a trembling hand, pointing to the window. "The ones they burned." A chill seeped into Eleanor's bones, and she felt something pulling at the edge of her mind, a whisper, a memory not her own. She saw flashes of a roaring bonfire, of faces twisted in agony, of ropes cutting into pale necks. The air smelled of scorched flesh and bitter herbs. A voice, thick with rage and sorrow, rasped in her ear, "They lit the flames, but we remain." The cottage door rattled violently. Eleanor turned just in time to see the latch snap open, the door swinging inward with a shriek. The wailing returned, louder now, pouring into the room like a tide. James' body arched, his lips moving rapidly in silent incantation, his fevered eyes rolling back. And then, silence. Eleanor's pulse pounded in her ears. The figures had vanished, but the air was thick with their presence. She turned to James, whose breathing had steadied. His eyes, when they met hers, were not entirely his own. "They will come again," he whispered. "They are always watching." A heavy knock came at the door. Eleanor flinched, dread pulling in her stomach. "The magistrate is here," a voice called. "Eleanor Graves, you are accused of witchcraft." Her blood turned to ice. The forest outside seemed to hum, the trees bending ever so slightly as if in anticipation. She saw it now, the endless cycle, the hunger of the gallows, the eternal reach of vengeance. The wailing woods would never be silent.